The moment one plays the move e takes d5, they are practically defecating on the board. You can't do that, can you? Along with other attributes associated with the exchange French, it is also a crime against chess principles. If someone tells you to play it, just know one thing. That's a terrible advice and cannot come from anyone who knows chess and wants best for you. Even when they want to get a draw by killing the game, which you can see currently happening on the board, that is, at least to say, a cowardice way to do it. We can see that the pawn structure is symmetrical and the pieces are slowly coming off the board. Exciting. Straight to the point, in order to avoid that kind of horror, your task is basically to create imbalances or tear down the symmetry. And let's see how that looks on the board. It means if white develops with a knight f3, black should respond with knight e7, and in case of knight e2, we develop on f6. If white puts the pawn on c3, we don't do the same, but put a knight on c6, which is not perfect, but it breaks the poisonous symmetry that white spilled on the board. Then if white puts the knight on c3, we put a pawn on c6. When white castles kingside, we can castle queenside, with a violent pawn storm coming from both sides. However, white's extra tempo in that case may prove critical, so we need to be careful when making such decision. Finally, we'd like to change the pawn structure. Sometimes that's done by pushing c5, which produces an IQP situation and may be a bit dubious. The other way is by trading pieces. Usually our knight by taking it to the e4 square and recapturing with the d5 pawn. What a relief when you see that the pawn structure changes. When it comes to trading pieces, a good tip for black is to try to trade the light square bishops by moving to f5 with the help of the e7 knight. If we do not have enough support for getting the bishop to f5, we can try using the moves like bishop e6, queen d7, and then bishop f5. And the last resort, maneuver bishop g4, h5, g6, which is typically seen in drawish French. Next thing to know is related with the question of how to develop the queen. Both sides prefer their queen being developed on the king side. If you play knight e7 before white g1 knight develops, white can safely play queen f3 or even better queen h5, and that queen controls the important f5 square, as well as adding annoying pressure to such squares as d5, f7 and h7, and there is no easy way to chase the queen away. The same works for black. If you get your queen to h4 or f6, without white being able to chase her away with the knight f3, we already have an accomplishment. Now we're going to see some examples to prove what is previously said. Starting with the most common move of white, bishop d3, we'll immediately respond by breaking the symmetry playing knight c6. It is asking for the response in view of c3. And now we develop bishop to d6, which is in 99% of the positions the best square for it. Now pay attention to the fact that our g8 knight is not developed yet, as it is waiting for the white queen to get to h5 or f3, in which case we'd have knight f6 gaining a tempo, or threatening bishop g4 with the tempo. White moves the g1 knight to f3. Now in case of also common move knight e2, the move knight g7 is fine, then develop the light square bishop, the queen, and finally castle long. Typically what I play as black. But what if we take advantage of white's knight being developed on e2 and play queen h4, immediately putting pressure on white's king side? Black is not better, but looking at the Lichess master database, we can see that the percentage of won games with black is pretty high. Going back to the knight f3, now we cannot really put our queen out, so we play knight g7. White castles, and then bishop g4. Now, development of the c8 bishop to g4 is also one of the trademarks of the aggressive approach by black in the exchange French, as the pin on f3 knight is quite annoying. White is tempted to play h3, trying to get rid of it. Black would just retreat the bishop to h5, going eventually to g6, and trading these bishops is only in favor of black. On the other side, white needs to be careful playing h3, because later they may be facing the pawn storm on the king side, and black is going to have easier job opening up white's king's position. White instead develops the b1 knight, with an intention to free up the queen, moving her to c2, unpinning the f3 knight. Queen d7. Remember this, as this is a typical formation when black is trying to get away from the boring lines of the exchange French. The last move announces a possibility of castling long and running the pawn storm on the king side. We'll have rook e1, asking black to make their final decision regarding the king. And this is indeed one of the well-known crossroads for black. And again, we'll check the master database, and you can see that black can indeed castle long or short, and they are all proven great for black. Let me tell you how to recognize when castling long is definitely preferred. We noticed a moment before that having h3 played, white would have difficulties dealing with the black's pawn storm on the king side. So in case of earlier h3 done, we'd go for the long side castling. Another common mistake white can make in this variation is getting their dark square bishop out to g5. At some point earlier, of course. Let's just put the bishop on g5 to illustrate the point and move the rook to f1 instead of having it on e1. Now we gladly play f6, and after bishop h4, the point is we continue with g5, and after bishop g3 we can castle long. And just look at how advanced black's pawns are already on the king side. Back to the main line. I'll go with the castling king side just to show you how even then you can try to go for a win. And we are following the game played by no other than Michal Tal, which is the right pronunciation of the player's name, versus Viktor Korchnoi. It is surprising that Tal went for this drawish line as white, but as he himself said after the game, it was the only time in his life, if that's an excuse. Korchnoi was in a must-win situation, and still he went with castling short, because white's queenside pawns are ideally set for the attack. The c3 pawn supporting b4, and also, let's not forget who's behind white's pieces. h3 played by white. Since black already castled short, this is less dangerous. Bishop f5, knight f1, rook a e8, bishop takes f5, queen takes f5, knight e3, queen d7, bishop d2, knight e8. And I'm just going quickly through these moves because it's not the point to analyze the game itself, but to picture how the pieces are moving in order to develop an initiative or an attack against white. Queen c2 we had in the game, and then c6. Now the pawn structure is virtually symmetrical, but black has two slight but distinct advantages. Black has kept his better bishop, and, well, again, white's h3 pawn is a potential target. King f1, f6, and knight h4, provoking f5. Now black has to be prepared to play this move and risk creating a hole on e5 if he wishes to play for the win. Rook e2, knight g6, knight takes g6, h takes g6, and rook a e1. So white has achieved his aim, he has doubled the rooks on the e-file, and now just awaits the mass exchanges and the draw. Knight e6, knight e1, queen f7, queen c1, stopping g5. b6, b4, stopping the c5 pawn break. You can see white is mainly reactive. And then g5. Turns out this is actually allowed, and it's an amazing move, of course, because in case of bishop take g5, there is f4, and black is trapping the white's bishop. We had king g1, g4, h take g4, f take g4, and g3, closing the b8, h2 diagonal that is making white's king vulnerable. And here black could continue with a move like queen g6, followed by king f7 and rook h8, which guarantees a winning attack according to Stockfish. Instead, black played a suboptimal queen f3, thinking that white cannot take on e6 since there is bishop g3. Well, Tal actually calculated better, and he saw that it leads to a draw. After rook takes e8, bishop takes f2, knight takes f2, queen takes f2, and king h1, they agreed to shake their hands and share the point, because there is nothing more than perpetual for black, queen h4, queen f2, for example. and not the way Korchnoi was thinking before the moves being played out. He thought that g3 is winning for black, but actually it's losing because of rook takes f8, king takes f8, rook to e8, check, amazing move, king takes e8, and then queen e1, forcing trade of the queens, and white emerges with an extra piece, winning. Now, the ending itself is not that much important for us as much as the middle game and the way how black managed to create initiative and attack on the king side using some tips and ideas mentioned in this video.